This is Farah on Fire. I'm Elizabeth Farah. We're joined by Dennis Prager, who needs no introduction. Of course, he's the founder of PragerU. And we're having a call today, or we're doing an interview today about what Dennis thinks Kamala's America would look like. Is it going to be the American dream, as we've all hoped and prayed for since the founding of America, or are we looking at a socialist communist nightmare? So I'm going to turn this over to you, Dennis. You sent a link over of her recent comments on Elon Musk that he has lost his privileges somehow.
He has lost his privileges and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that you can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. The same rule has to apply, which is that there has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
And I'd like you to expound on that and anything else that has to do with our First Amendment freedom.
So I have a very long answer, but I'll try to keep it short. And if you want me to amplify, tell me. So the most important thing for people to understand, and if one does not understand this, one can vote for the Democrats. If one does understand this, one cannot. That is how important this is. There is no example in the history of leftism that a leftist group in power, whether it's in a country, in a state, in a city, at a university, at a glee club, wherever, whenever, since the Russian Revolution, the left has been in power, it has suppressed speech. There is no such thing as leftism and free speech, because the left understands that when there is free speech, the left is not in power. The left is capable of maintaining power only through the suppression of speech. Again, I'm as affirmative and clear as possible. You cannot find an example of leftists who allow free speech. If they allow it, it is only because they can't stop it. They are constrained by a country's constitution. They are constrained by elections, whatever it is. But that's what they do. This does not apply to liberals. I have spent a lifetime distinguishing between leftists and liberals. Liberals vote for the left, which they will have to answer to God for. I mean that literally. But they are not leftist in their orientation. Liberals believe in free speech. In fact, the greatest difference between a liberal and a leftist is on free speech. If a liberal does not believe in free speech or doesn't believe in free speech for hate speech, their favorite line, which means that they don't believe in free speech because they call everything they don't agree with, they have two words for everything they don't agree with: hate speech and misinformation. So that's very important. The misuse of both words, the strangulation, the perversion of both of those words, misinformation and hate speech, is what enables them to suppress free speech. So people need to understand, if you vote for Kamala Harris, you are voting for suppression of speech. That's it. The very fact that she refers to it as a privilege, you have a privilege.
That was shocking to me. I had not seen that clip yet.
Yeah,
I mean,
but the word is quite instructive.
Well, didn't Tim Walz say something very similar to that? That free speech is not, broadly limited or unlimited, or
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
They all say that. Yes, it's that, right. Like 45% of young Americans asked by Pew Research, do you believe in free speech? They said, yes, but not for hate speech. So the left has been effective. These kids don't understand that if you're not for free speech for hate speech, you're not for free speech. It's as simple as that. Free speech, so what are they for? Free speech for love speech?
right, because the very essence of free speech, as found in our Bill of Rights, is the fact that the offensive speech, especially speech that would be considered, say, derogatory towards political opponents and or arguing against government policies and practices. These are the very things that most need to be protected, obviously, besides the freedom to speak on your faith.
Well, let me give you two foreign examples because this is true all over the world. Wherever the left comes into power, it suppresses free speech. So in Brazil, they have already banned X. Whether it be reinstated or not is I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the future. But as of Saturday, X was banned in by Lula, the essentially communist government that is in power in Brazil. In Germany, the case is so absurd and laughable, but it's not. It is absurd but not laughable, and that is that somebody on Gab, a social media site, said that the head of the Green Party, or one of the heads of the Green Party, was fat. And the German police have demanded that Gab give the name of the person and to be put on trial and possibly arrested and put in prison for a year for saying that a politician was fat.
And this is also, of course, famously happening all over the UK.
Wherever the left is in power, it happens. That's my point. That people don't fear the left, they fear the right, is simply a validation of one's belief that they are so effective at brainwashing human beings. The threat to the United States is 90% from the left.
I agree with you. And I think that what we see often is they'll talk about the right and pigeonhole that with fascism and
That's right.
Nazism.
Well, they have
And that
always
whole
done that.
spectrum is, yeah, the
That's
whole
right.
spectrum
Right.
is out of whack. Because if you had a legitimate spectrum, which I do, and I'm assuming you do, Dennis, is on the left, you would have totalitarian, authoritarian, socialist, communist, Marxist, Maoist, Leninist, etc. That is God is not God. Government and man is God. It's the rule of man, not the rule of law. And then far to the right, short of anarchy, and which always leads back to that left in a circular motion, is freedom of the individual. And God is God, and we have liberties. But I think what happened is the left decided they needed a bad guy on the right. So suddenly Nazism, which is National Socialism, is placed under far right extremism, which is what I would be called in this insane universe. But Hitler belongs with Mao, Stalin, Lenin, and Marx. Am I wrong about that?
So here's my understanding of the Hitler issue. So Hitler hated capitalism as much as Marx and Lenin and Stalin and Mao. There was a great book written by an English historian about Hitler, and that's why it's called National Socialism. He loathed capitalism. He thought it was a Jewish invention, and so therefore it's awful. So the hatred of capitalism renders Nazism a left-wing movement, but it differs from the left in this way. His was a racist-based socialism, whereas Stalin's was a class-based, classical left-wing distinction. There is no other example of a race-based totalitarian government. And so he's sui generis. Hitler and the Nazis are a unique phenomenon. So the only way you could call them right-wing is if you believe that racism is definitionally right-wing, which is what...
Which is not.
Well, of course, right-wing has nothing to do with race. Right-wing... See, here is a proof about the lie that Trump is a threat to democracy. It's a proof. It's not even a suggestion. Why would the party or the candidate for smaller government be a threat to freedom? If it's definitionally impossible. That's why the Republicans are not a threat. The Republicans want a smaller state. You can't do as much damage with a small state as you can do with a big state. All the genocides of the 20th century were committed by big governments. Big government is the enabler of genocide. That you can't have it without it. So the people who want...
That's why we have a system that's a republic, and that is a federal republic, a federation of states that are sovereign, where you can bring the majority of questions down to the smallest of political entities. Well, it's not technically the smallest, but each state. So in other words, Virginia.
Yes, it was all to dilute power.
Mm-hmm. It was all a system to dilute power. Just states and the people would grant limited, declared or defined powers to the federal government. Now that's completely out the window and has been for so long that most people don't even talk about it. And I think this goes along with your discussion of the fact that they have been so good at brainwashing rather than educating our students, our children for so many decades, not just in the government institutions of the so-called public school system, but also in every aspect of news media, entertainment, higher education, all of it. Just the political discourse, they have poisoned it with disinformation. So when we speak to the American people, Dennis, and we're saying that the right wing, which has nothing to do with racism, it has to do with liberty, small government, maintaining, in this conversation, our freedom of speech. And President Donald Trump, remember, she called also for him to be deplatformed when it was Twitter, now known as X.
But I guess the question about you I know you wrote to Twitter and the CEO, Jack Dorsey, and asked him to take away the president's Twitter handle, his account. How is that not a violation of free speech? I mean, the president has the same rights that you have, that I have, and how would that not just be a slippery slope where they have to ban, half of the people on Twitter?
And now she's calling. What is she calling for, by the way? Is Elon being deplatformed from his company, or is the government deplatforming him from First Amendment rights? Because I'm not quite sure what she was calling for.
I'm not sure either, except that you can be certain that should they be elected, the Democrats, there will be a war against Elon Musk.
Could he end up in prison just like
of course he could. But their primary concern is not to imprison him. They want to imprison Donald Trump, but their primary concern is to shut him down. Whether he ends up in prison or at a Hollywood or a Las Vegas resort, it doesn't matter to them. They just want to shut him down. He owns the largest tweet site in the world, or at least in the Western world, and is not a leftist. This is extremely troubling to the left.
You think?
Yeah.
I think it's very, very troubling. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even on social media until after he purchased Twitter and made it into X. And I believe that he is going to be looked at as a freedom fighter and a hero.
Yeah,
I think he already is, but in the decades to come and in the history books.
Let's put it this way.
Seminal moment.
No Democrat will.
That's true. So what do you think for the average Joe? My husband's name is Joseph, so he hates that expression, but for the average Joe,
you did not marry the average Joe, so it's not an issue.
No, that he is not. For the everyday American, like me, like all the millions of Americans out there, we're not Elon Musk, we're not President Trump. What does our loss of the First Amendment, freedom to speech, bode for us in the next 4 years, should we allow her through laziness and I don't know what other reasons she could possibly win. We'll just leave that to another conversation on election integrity and fraud. But should she take office with Tim Walz, who also doesn't believe in the freedom of speech, what will happen? What are the practical aspects to you and me and to the rest of this country?
It's the end of, it sounds sort of circular, but the end of free speech is the end of freedom. That is the most important freedom that exists, is free speech. One of the reasons, there are obvious reasons, but a less obvious reason is that it is the thing that most gives you dignity. The ability to express yourself gives you dignity. Everything about the left is vile, and the assault on human dignity is such an example. I mean, anything they touch, you sort of, drag queen story hour, aside from the fact that it's so wrong to present to children, it does not present the people engaged in it. It doesn't enhance their dignity. For a man to dance in a skirt or a dress is, at the very least, it is not dignified. If you go to many of the LGBTQ parades, there's a massive amount of public behavior. I'm not assessing private behavior, but public behavior. The dignity is a public thing. It's hard to lose your dignity privately. you lose your dignity in the eyes of, you could say, putting God aside, in the eyes of humans. So when you can't speak your mind, you have lost your human dignity. What other freedom then matters? The freedom to do what? Seriously, the freedom to do what? To watch Monday Night Football? I mean, I'm not being cute. I'd like to know what freedom matters if you cannot express yourself. The reason we regard North Korea as the vilest place on earth is because freedom of speech is so spectacularly limited that you better watch what you say to your spouse in bed at night. There is a fear. You are told that your thoughts are known by the state in North Korea. So it's the most important freedom.
And that's happening across the world now, because I think this is about brainwashing and dumbing down of the intellectual understanding of the philosophies of Judeo-Christian culture, of the West, of the rule of law. All of these things are utterly bereft in the school systems. And since parents were dumbed down before, they can't even transmit or correct what schools and universities are perverting in the classrooms. And so we have people who do not even understand what will befall us should Kamala Harris take office.
Well, you mentioned earlier, one of the reasons is laziness. People don't want to be aware. By the way, you mentioned Judeo-Christian. I'll give you a perfect example, because my belief is, my big belief, the grand scheme belief, is that the war is between the Bible and the left. And I give example after example. But let me give one example here with regard to freedom and dissent. So the first Jew and the first monotheist is Abraham. And what does Abraham do? Abraham argues with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. Why would you kill 50 people if there are 50 decent people, God? Okay, I won't kill 50. All right, what about 40? What about 30? What about 20? What about 10? At no point does God say, hello, man, I'm God. Who the hell are you to argue with me? It's a spectacular lesson in freedom. You are free to argue and dissent from God. But for the left, who take on the role of God, they are more autocratic than God himself. Dissent against God is allowed. Dissent against the left is not.
I agree wholeheartedly that this is, and that's a beautiful illustration, by the way, um, Abraham, hero of the faith. And it is shocking when you go back and you're reading the Torah and you're seeing Abraham arguing with God, and it is, well, Ezekiel argued with God because he gave
Moses argued with God, and they all, that's a whole, the name Israel in the Torah, it's in the Bible. The name Israel means argue with God. That's what the word means.
And I guess that's kind of metaphoric for this war against Judeo-Christian culture and our belief system, the foundational document upon which it stands, the denial that we are truly, okay, you're Jewish. I call myself actually Judeo-Christian.
God bless you. God,
or a messianic
yes.
believer. I study Torah, the prophets. I only wish more people did, especially the left. It would be so great if they understood the God of the Bible. But the point being that if we were not founded as essentially a Christian or Judeo-Christian, when you start talking about these nuances, that could be a 2-hour conversation. But a biblical Christian or Judeo-Christian nation, that is denied. You can't even teach history or philosophy of government or the Constitution or law without understanding the Judeo-Christian foundation of our nation. Full stop. That's been eliminated. And, when you go to the New York Times, which I do every day, and you see guest essays, the First Amendment is out of control. The Constitution is the problem. It's the thing getting in the way. In one article I was just reading yesterday, the Constitution is the problem. And they link to a Harvard proposal that would not, because they want to override our constitutional government. So they have to have tricks to do it, like filibuster issues. They want to make Washington, D.C. not one state. It's a tiny little city. It's not even a big city. It's a tiny, dinky little city. They don't want to make it one state. They want to make it multiple states to overwhelm the system with the United States of 52, 53, 54 states. And that would utterly, permanently put in the uniparty. It would burn our Constitution.
Yeah, I got to see that. They're proposing that D.C. be 2 states?
Or more. They didn't even limit it to 2. They just kept calling it states. I could send you that link.
Well, let's make Wyoming 14 states.
I know. I know. I started carving up the United States, and I wanted to keep California. I wasn't sure if that was dangerous to make it more or fewer states. Anyway, the point being, they hate the Constitution. We all know that the founding fathers quoted Deuteronomy more than any single document or book or author. And this is an affront to their deepest beliefs, which are Marxist. And so Christians and Jews, and boy, that really upsets me when liberal Jews do not understand how dangerous the leftist Democrat Party is.
It disturbs me more because I'm Jewish.
Yeah, well, I'm such a Zionist.
As I often state, many Jews are a perfect example of the non-relationship between intelligence and wisdom.
That's a subset. That is an American liberal left-wing subset of Jews. But I think we need to do all we can for Black Americans and Jewish Americans to understand which side they should be on.
Yep.
But it is a war against Judeo-Christianity.
Yep.
And it's interesting that so many people think that freedoms are separated from our freedom to exercise, not freedom to worship, freedom to exercise our religion and our free speech. They are inextricably combined. You cannot separate the two. What do I have the right to talk about without freedom of speech? I can't exercise my religion. And in Ireland yesterday, a Christian pastor was just put into prison because he would not affirm the LGBTQ transgender ideology.
Right.
They're arresting them and putting them into prison. Could that happen in America?
It's happening in Canada. Canada's just a couple of years ahead of us.
Well, Dennis, the nightmare scenario is I think what you're saying is that Elon Musk will be stripped of his company or somehow punished in a great way. All of his...
If they win, yeah. If they win, that's correct. That's why people should know you vote for the party, not the candidate. This notion of, it's so naive. Oh, I like him. I like her. I don't like him. I don't like her. There are many likable people who destroy societies. Okay? Likable and moral idiot can easily go hand in hand.
Well, that's a great way to end this because I think you've said it all.
May I just recommend, since we talked about this and I got my idea, what I explained about Abraham arguing, I have my fourth volume of my 5-volume commentary on the Torah, the Rational Bible, is coming out this year. And
I was going to mention that.
So yeah, well, it's really I didn't